Ladies and gentlemen, my name's Paul, and in this RedGamingTech.com video, we're going to be discussing and analysing tech news which, as usual, has popped up in the past 24 or so hours. And by golly gosh, there's an awful lot of news today, including lots of AMD news. But the first thing we're going to tackle is AMD's Threadripper 3000. So you may recall about 2 weeks ago, on the 13th of August this year, of course, there was the first 32-core 64-thread result that appeared on the Geekbench database. It was Geekbench 4.4.1, and the score was 5677 for the single-core score, and the multi-core score was 94,772. It's worth noting, though, that it was Linux that this score appeared on, and the thing about that is Linux typically does better with Geekbench results, but still, it provided us a few valuable insights, the first of which was, well, it existed, which is always nice, and that the performance was absolutely monstrous. That is the word that would most aptly describe the performance. I feel monstrous is probably about the most accurate. But there is a new result on the same version of Geekbench 4.4.1, and this time it's conducted on Windows 64-bit, of course. The single-core score is 5523, whereas the multi-core score is 68,576. The basic specifications of the processor are, well, identical in terms of, let's say, the cache. So that's not really surprising. It's got 16 times 8 in terms of the level 3 cache, which of course means that it's got 128 megabytes level 3 total, and so on and so on. Exactly what you would expect for the Zen 2 architecture. But I do want to discuss a couple of other points before we really start to go into the performance numbers. So the base frequency here is being identified as 2.2 gigahertz with a maximum frequency of 4.17, so 4,170 megahertz. This is a bit different to the previous result. The previous result had a base frequency of 3.6 gigahertz, which is considerably less, well, crap, to be totally honest, in terms of a base frequency. So obviously a lot higher base frequency. So one of these results does not have, however, the boost frequency. Now what's really interesting, though, is, and regular perusers of the Geekbench database will know this, if you add .gb4, I'll repeat that again, GB4, so Great Britain 4 at the end of the result, whatever that is, it will come into a rather nice drill down of the results, including a lot more information regarding the processor frequency. And indeed, if you circle between the two results here, the frequency in terms of the median is 4.275. This is compared to the older result, which is 4321. The minimum frequency of the older result is 4112 compared to the newer result, which is 3713. The maximum speed is basically 4300 megahertz compared to 4363, and the mean result is 4279 compared to 4261. So in terms of frequencies, then the older result is ever so slightly higher, but not that much of a big deal. And it's basically just another example of an engineering sample. Unfortunately, what we can't do, because the processor is essentially being identified with, well, let's just be honest, the most unhelpful string in the history of humanity. All we can see is it's AMD 100, lots of zeros, 1111. So we can't find out any information regarding the engineering, how late of an engineering sample it is. There we go. I got the words out, didn't I? I got the words out. Now let's go into the results before tackling more stuff about this, because the result is really, really impressive. So it's very possible it's still in an early engineering sample, so that's possibly one of the reasons we're seeing the base frequency being a bit weird here. But the third generation Threadripper is scoring 68,576 in the multi-core result. Now, if you compare that to the 2990WX, which is also a 32-core processor, but based on the Zen Plus architecture, that scores around the 36, 37, maybe 38,000 mark. Sometimes a little more. You can push up to around the low 40s if you are overclocking and you do some tweaking. You've got really good memory, blah, 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 blah. As for the single core performance, however, if you're lucky and you do some heavy overclocking, you'll get the low 5,000 mark with the same CPU, the 90WX. Stock, it scores around the 4,800, 4,900 region. So that's really good. It also kind of beats Intel's processors with a stick as well. So basically, the results of this CPU are really, really impressive because Intel's Xeon CPUs, they're going to score around the 5,200 mark with the W175, which is the processor which most closely matches this particular scale, and the Intel CPUs usually score a little bit higher in multi-threading than the 90WX, so you can probably say that 38,000 is going to be the lower end, and maybe once again low 40,000 for the higher end, and potentially a little more if you're doing some overclocking, which you can't discount. But obviously, at the end of the day, these processors, or rather these results we're seeing here, are engineering samples. And I also would like to remind you that there is definitely something hinky going on with the Threadripper platform, if you believe the rumors. I did cover this more in depth about a week ago, if memory serves. But essentially, for those who did not follow that piece of news, if so, you can skip maybe a couple of minutes. But basically speaking, back in the day, a week ago, we learned that the Threadripper platform may be segmented into two particular tiers. So one would be very much like it is now. It's, I guess you could say, for multimedia enthusiasts and so on. And then we also have a higher end Threadripper platform, which is meant more for workstation purposes. And from the leaks, it would appear like we have a 4-channel memory setup for the, I guess you could say, more enthusiast market, whereas the workstation market would have like 8 channels for its particular solution. So it's going to be really interesting to see what happens in terms of the core count segmentation between the two lineups as well. So the second piece of news is less good news for AMD compared to the potential performance of the Threadripper CPUs, and this actually concerns a class action lawsuit that was filed in California, and AMD are going to be coughing up $12.1 million US, and this is going to be payable for consumers who purchased an FX 8120, 8150, 8320, 8350, the 370, the 9370, or an FX 5990. And this is applicable for anyone who was residing in the United States, or you can also claim this via AMD.com. So what is this concerning? Well, basically it concerns AMD's marketing and representation of the Bulldozer architecture. So you might recall that AMD marketed this as the first 8-core processor that was available for the mainstream market. So obviously we're discounting things such as servers. But the plaintiffs said that that's not really true, and they felt that because the CPUs were not actually having separate execution units, AMD have actually been fighting this since 2011. So the processors were launched back in 2011. So if you want to consider this $12 million US an apology, it's a little late. And you have to also take into consideration that the lawyers' fees are also going to be part of this fund, which means that about $3.5 million US out of the $12 million US is going to be eaten up by lawyer fees, which is still quite a lot of money. So the best case scenario is that you're going to get around $35 US per processor, which, to be honest, given the amount of time that's lapsed, isn't a huge amount of cash. This is not the first time that a company have been sued, of course, for misrepresentation. You might recall Nvidia being rather guilty with their GTX 970 and the whole 3.5 gigabytes of memories thing. They had to pay out, what was it, 30 or 40 US dollars for eligible customers. I think it was like 30 bucks. So I suppose if you look at it that way, AMD are actually being a little more generous. They're giving you 35 US dollars, which I suppose if you're looking to buy a new processor, hey, a couple of bucks extra in your pocket is not a bad thing, right? Last piece of AMD news for the day, and it comes to us through foreignx.com. The Renoir graphics power management has now been enabled in Linux driver patches. So if you're unfamiliar with Renoir, it is the next generation of APUs, and they are not RDNA/Navi based. Instead, they use Vega. So we've actually seen quite a few patches that have started rolling out for Renoir. So the power features of Renoir are around 37 patches total, which is around 1,000 lines of code. The rest of them would be for Raven Ridge, Picasso, and other bits and pieces. So these patches make the adjustments needed for power play. So essentially, we can start doing things, like clock gating and so on. It's quite interesting because we still obviously don't have a release date for Renoir, but the fact that we're starting to see driver patches means at the very least that the engineering samples are doing rather well. And now for an update on the GlobalFoundries bombshell that rocked the world yesterday, and that was the fact that GlobalFoundries alleged that TSMC had infringed on multiple of its patents, and this would have been, what's the best way of describing it? Bad. For lots of different companies, including Apple, Broadcom, Nvidia, and lots of others, because they all use TSMC for the production of their chips. So potentially, you could have a situation where the sale of products which were manufactured using one of these allegedly stolen patents could be stopped for sale in the United States as well as Germany. So obviously that would be devastating to multiple different companies. However, there is an update because TSMC have denied GlobalFoundries patent violations and have basically claimed that no, we've not infringed on any of your patents. Instead, we've developed all of this technology in-house. And the response has actually come from the Senior Director of Corporate Information of TSMC. Hopefully I'm going to pronounce her name correctly. If not, I profusely apologize. Sun Yuan, that is S-U-N, and then the surname is Y-O-W-E-N. And she states that, yes, we have not infringed on any of the patents. She also said that it's impossible for TSMC to have infringed of any of GlobalFoundries' patents, because essentially she said that otherwise we would not have been at the forefront of the semiconductor world. Basically, she's kind of slapping them upside the head and saying, well, yeah, your technology is not as good as ours, so we're not stealing your stuff. And in a previous statement, a TSMC spokesperson had said, and I quote, "We are disappointed to see a foundry peer resort to meritless lawsuits instead of competing in the marketplace with technology. We will fight vigorously using any and all options to protect our proprietary technologies," end quote. So GlobalFoundries are claiming 16 patents have been infringed, which is an awful lot. So I think this is going to be one of those court cases where, personally speaking, I'm not so interested in the legal stuff generally. I guess I'm more into the tech, but this is going to be one of those things where we're going to have to follow rather closely, because it's going to have very far-reaching implications and ramifications, which I know basically mean the same thing here, but I wanted to emphasize it in the tech world. And now on to something a little bit lighter, because I don't want to end on such a negative note, and that is Xbox, because Microsoft are happy with the studios it's acquired, but they don't necessarily feel that they've acquired enough studios, so more will be acquired, possibly. This actually is from comments from Aaron Greenberg, who was recently having an interview with Twin Finite. I'm going to read this out verbatim. It's a tough question to answer. What I would say is we are very deliberate. I think Phil spoke about this as well. There was a period of time we were very focused on adding more content to our first-party studios. At E3 a year prior, we announced 5 new teams had joined. Then it's been exciting more at XO, and then Double Fine this year. It's been exciting. We're great getting to know all of these teams, going out and sitting down with Ninja Theory, all the teams at Obsidian or In Exile, and seeing the stuff they're working on now that people know about things, and the secret things that are still in the works that people don't know about yet. We'll in time be sharing more about those. I feel good about the level of content we have coming from our internal studios, but we felt good about that, and the opportunity with Double Fine came in. It was just the perfect fit. You never know, but I think right now, with our 15 internal studios, we really feel good about the amount of content we're getting from that. Whether it's supporting Project Scarlet or supporting games Xbox Games Pass or on PC or console. We feel like we have a healthy set of content across multiple genres, multiple game types, and that will excite our fans. It's been definitely a wild ride if you've been a Microsoft/Xbox fan for the last couple of years, because you've seen the company essentially go from an anemic and terrible first-party lineup, with the odd exception here or there, to an amazing potential lineup. I mean, 15 teams all working on multiple projects. I'm personally ridiculously excited for Gears 5, which of course launches momentarily. We've seen enough with Halo Infinite to make me really just ridiculously excited about it, and so on. Hopefully, we can see Microsoft take it to Nintendo and Sony for first party next generation, and I want both all 3 companies to be ridiculously competitive, because that's only good for us, particularly given Microsoft are also producing the games for the PC, which I know the majority of my audience are going to be more focused on. Anyway, hopefully you've enjoyed the video. Normal stuff if you did. Like, share, comment and subscribe, and I'll see you soon. Take care. Bye for now.